welcome to Speakeasy, a Nuff Said podcast. I'm Hayley Nicholson, owner and event content specialist at Nuff Said.
And I'm Jenny. I'm a freelance conference producer and I specialise in sustainability content as well.
And this is very exciting. So,
It is?
we're a bit nervous, not going to lie. What was it? We've never done a podcast. I've done some speaking engagements. I've done a few things in the industry.
I'm very much a behind the scenes kind of gal.
And I think a couple of months ago now, I gave Jenny a call and I said, mate, I think we should do something. I think we should talk a little bit more about conference production and content. And I think we should really tell a little bit more behind the scenes, especially because we've both just started our freelance journeys. I've been going for about 18 months now. How long has it been for you now?
I think officially like 4.
So I'm
still a baby.
Still a baby. Yeah. I'm still a baby. What was it? I've been working with people that have been freelancing as a stage manager, room manager, producer for 20, 30, 40 years and so much to learn, which is amazing. But I thought, let's talk about our experiences. So for those that don't know, me and Jenny used to work together at Incisive Media. I was event content manager for financial services and you were event content manager for sustainability.
Yeah, and I actually also interviewed you.
You did actually. I forgot about that when you said that.
That was the first time we met, wasn't Teams, which I thought, I'm going to interview Hayley, okay.
There we go. Now we're good friends.
Yeah.
What was it? And what was it? I keep saying what was it? And then now here we are, both now working as freelancers, working on lots more events, lots of different industries, and wanting to talk a little bit more about what conference production is actually like. And I think that there's a really big misconception about what we do for our role and just some of those nuances that comes with being a producer or a content manager, whichever role title you have. So shall we get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so first of all, to you, what would you say a conference producer is?
Gosh, I mean, it's taken 7 years for my mum to understand what I do as a job. So I don't know if I've done that elevated pitch very well over the past years. But in a way, what I say a conference producer does is essentially someone gives us an idea. This is an event we want to run. We research the market to see, one, is this needed? Sometimes it may not be needed, but you're still going to find a way of making that event unique. And then, essentially make that idea into a reality by thinking a lot about the content, putting an agenda that would be interesting for people to attend, and then make sure that all the teams really understand the vision of what we're trying to build, and then eventually actually be on site to deliver that. That's how I would kind of, in a weird, maybe long-worded way, describe it. Don't know if you've got any other ways.
It's a very central role. I would say that we are in the very middle of every department for an event. So if we're talking as well on our experience mostly lies within, I would say, the professional conference organizer side, which I think sits within things like association and publishers, magazines that then have an events brand on the side to engage their audience. And within those teams, you'll have marketing, editorial, sponsorship, operations. Am I missing anybody?
Those are definitely the key ones.
Those are the key ones.
Sometimes get delegate teams, not as much anymore.
Delegate acquisition sometimes, but that often rolls into marketing as well now, and there's a different shift. And I would say that we sit central to all those teams because we communicate so much with all of those teams. How are you getting your delegates in? What's going to appeal for them for the content? Sponsorship, how are we aligning editorial with commercial? So we're working with 2 departments there and being that middleman. Marketing, what are we producing? What are we creating that they can put out to people? Operations, how are you bringing our vision to life?
Yeah.
And there's obviously lots of other elements to conferences and expos, trade shows and those, but I would say that we sit so centrally within that overall vision for the event. And
yeah, I think in that sense, it's almost like we become the project managers, but also in a really weird way, the projects become our babies. I don't know how many times I've called an event my baby.
Absolutely.
But it is because I am quite passionate about making sure it's delivered properly and delivered Didn't mean that pun, but yeah.
No, but it is that. I think that we put so much blood, sweat and tears into it. So many phone calls, whether it's working with delegates, working with speakers, whether working with sponsors, and then the internal teams and all of our stakeholders. And we just sit so centrally to that. And when it comes to an event and what makes an event and I'm trying to think of the phrase.
We become the face of the event a lot of times. Like externally, like a lot of people will know the event and associate our names with that event at that point. And internally, we are sadly sometimes the go-to person for everyone when they want to understand a part of the event.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
I think conference production, one thing that really works for us as a role is that there is a process. There is an overall process. It doesn't matter what event you're doing, what sector, what topic, what time of year, what location. There is an overall process that works really well in our job that makes sure that we can deliver what we need to. Can you explain the process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I would say, it's a bit strange because currently I've been very specialised in a specific sector. So I do sometimes feel like I can easily skip some of the steps. But essentially, someone gives us the brief of the event that they want to run. You maybe do some desk research if you're not familiar with the content, just so you can actually understand a bit of who are the people that really you want to have research conversations with. And at that point, it's about reaching out to people and say, hey, we're looking to put this event together. We want to make sure that this event is actually relevant to you. And then, I start emailing people to get those research calls in. And then within those research calls, I'm sure you've got like a set of questions you usually ask. I don't know, actually, I kind of wanted to bring this up. How have you found out research has changed over the past? Like, I feel people used to be more receptive than as of late.
I think because I differ to you where you specialise in sustainability and net zero as a sector. I call myself like a general producer. I have a process that works across sectors. So I've done everything from education, HR, sales, technology. I'm trying to think what else I've done. Real estate. I've done.
Maybe easier saying what you've not done.
I know, actually. What was it? What I've done? I haven't actually done that much in sustainability. I've done sustainability within sectors, but I've never done it as an overall industry, which I think is really interesting. And it's quite funny because I'm always looking at like what kind of events do I want to do, and at the moment it's really looking at wine.
I'd be up for a wine event.
Any wine shows that need a producer. Call me.
Didn't even know wine was a kind of event, but maybe call me too.
Wine trade shows, absolutely, and they have conference programs. And And what I love is that actually there's so many conferences and trade shows for everything.
True.
Like you think about it, there will be some kind of event, and they will have an education program, and that's where we come in. So, if there's something you want to do, I just love to do wine. I like wine.
I don't know if I'd
do
be
you think
able
my
to.
research calls would involve going to a vineyard and sampling? How can I understand these various types of grapes without tasting it myself in the home region?
I think you've got a business case for it, definitely. Let me know if you can add a partner to the business case.
I might need a second person to help.
Once you get too drunk, I can step in.
It's a really big education program.
Yeah.
But I think that research, for me, no matter the sector, there's a certain process that I can take. And I first of all start with, there's lots of areas, but I first of all start with what are the biggest trends at the moment? What are you seeing? In terms of political and policy, what is changing? Because there's always something that's happening that's going to affect any industry. Technological advancement is always a good one. What's happening with people? That's another one. Sustainability always comes up. We come up.
Sorry.
You got to get it in. What was it? It comes into technology, but AI is another one. That's a really big topic for everything. And then I have a series of other questions that I love to ask that always gets great answers out of people. And rather than asking people to hear what do they want to hear about an event, I always ask what do they not want to hear about. That's my favourite questions to ask, because you get really great nuggets of what else is happening on the circuit. So every industry has their calendar of events, and if I'm working for somebody, I want to know what are they seeing at the overall, you know, at other events that they don't want to hear about because it's boring. And that's when you can really nail down what should be included and what shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit hesitant to reveal the question I always ask because I'm like, people are going to copy it.
I know, I've really shot myself in the foot, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll join you. I'll join you in shooting myself. I mean,
Cut that.
I mean, I would say I actually always ask. Obviously, I assume most people go to other events. I'm not going to assume that the only event they ever go to is the one I happen to be producing. But I always ask, like, what have you been craving from events that you're not getting? What is it that you're going to an event and you think, oh, I missed this? And sometimes it's networking. Sometimes it's people I mean, the one I get a lot now is we want case studies. We want like proper examples of what people are doing. Because especially in sustainability, I mean, you'll laugh at this. One of the events I used to always put song titles, as you well know. And the one that I liked the most, or I think reflected the most, was a little less conversation, a little more action.
100%.
And I think it's funny because that's what a lot of people are craving. And yet it's not so much what people are happy to talk about. Not everyone wants to show what their business and company are doing. So it's finding that balance, I think, is at the moment was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So we've covered research.
Yeah.
What's after research?
After research is the fun part, is writing the agenda. At least for me, it's my favorite part. Yeah. I start at that point. You know, I think you start hearing a lot of the same topics come up at the same points, and you start thinking, how can I maybe make that topic a bit more interesting or fresh? Because let's be honest, especially if you do the same kind of event on repeat, there's not that much that changes in a year.
What angle do you
So
take?
it's what angle do you take to make this new conversation be interesting and different?
You can't just roll out the future of every year.
Yeah. The future of doesn't change that much in a year. And sadly, when it does change a lot, you do get a bit worried by the state of the world. But yeah, and start creating and coming together with how do you want the program to run? How many panel discussions is appropriate? Do we want to include workshops? How do I schedule all these topics that are very interesting into from 9 to 5 sometimes, or if it's 2 days, a lot of times I'm like, don't have enough time, and I need to figure out how to be a wizard of time to fit in everything I want to talk about.
For me, the hard one is one day, one track programs.
Ooh, yeah,
and you know, like when we worked together, I did a number of those, which having to really choose your key topics that are going to engage your audience and let them leave with something that they've learned as well. That's really hard. That's why I love working on the larger events that maybe have 4 or 5 stages and maybe go across 2 days. Yeah. And it's great because you just have so much more room to play with.
Yeah, and even at that stage is also thinking, well, how can we make these different stages be different? So especially in sustainability events that I've been working on, it was like a lot of times the conversations were like, do we go down by sector, or do we want to go down by like the types of sessions that we're going to deliver in that? Like, how do you do it? And it's deciding what you think is going to fit that event best, that specific year. So I guess I love it.
I think agenda writing can be really fun because as well, it depends on the brand that you're working with and the event that you're working with and how much risk that they want to take as well. There's still a lot. I've done a lot in financial services, tends to be very corporate based and very kind of top line. But there are lots of sectors that are looking to take more risk. And I think, like you said, with things like song titles for session titles, but perhaps be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek with, you know, some of the sessions that they're writing there, but that's what markets an event, and you know, and that's what a delegate attracts to. So I think when we get that opportunity to be creative is so much fun, but it doesn't always have to be about being cheeky or you know, even with top line content, writing something, we have to be experts in a way. We have to be mini experts in these topic areas to then create something coherent to people that are actual experts. That's terrifying.
It is.
Because I don't know about you, I think I was early 20s when I first started in this, and to have to become a subject matter expert on something I'd never done through research and through just absorbing information, to then put on a program that at the end of the day, my first ever event was targeted at senior leaders, and I'm talking VPs and C-suites for the FTSE 250, having to write a program for them, and then also watching them come to my event and see the banners with my key topics on was absolutely amazing and terrifying at the same time. And then I think that's why I got hooked into this role, because the idea that these people that have been doing these jobs for 30, 40, however many years came to my event that I'd, produced and wanted to hear about a program that I put on, I was like, my God.
Yeah, I remember my first conference I had to fully produce myself was on social housing finance. And now I'm a girl who is not a maths girl. Like, I did literature, I did anything other than maths. Finance, when that was the first one I got given, I thought, how on earth am I going to write that and make it interesting or even understand what the topic is? Also happened to be put on my birthday. So I thought that was an internal joke for a bit. But yeah, eventually, like, by actually going through the process, the way that it's, run, next thing you know, I have actually written an agenda that people were praising. People were happy to be part of the event. I remember even like having those pre-panel calls, which we'll talk about, I guess, later. But I remember one doing it with like the Bank of England, some guy. Honestly, I still do not understand what on earth it was on about. And they all asked me, so Jenny, what angle do you think we should take on this? And I went, guys, you're the ones working in finance. I just know it'll be interesting to bring you together. And sometimes I think it's quite good to just, as you said, we're meant to be mini experts, but actually a lot of times I feel quite open now. I probably didn't so much then to say, I'm not the expert.
Yeah.
I just know that bringing you guys together will make an interesting discussion.
We guide them to figure out what that angle is going to be a lot of the time. But this is where our knowledge does come in, and we go, well, I know that people really don't want to hear about this anymore. And it's some of that kind of, that research phase that we did and go, people are bored of hearing about this, but really want to hear about this particular side of the conversation, and encouraging them to maybe take a risk as well. I love a controversial panel. I really do. I've put a few on and had the pushback maybe from whether it's a commercial leader or editorial as well that we always work so closely with. I've had that pushback, but I say, like, no, if you want to make a splash on stage, like, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
So we've written an agenda.
Yeah.
Next is I would say the trickiest part of our entire process, which is speaker recruitment and convincing people to come and speak at our event. And I think event to event, company to company, this really differs. It depends on the audience that you've curated and how much that event or that brand is engaging them all throughout the year. I think if you're working for somebody that's maybe a publisher that has an online magazine, which is a lot of what we've done before, I think it can be easier to bring on some of those speakers. But if it's purely you run this event and it's a commercial interest, then it becomes a little bit more tricky sometimes. But it always depends on so many factors. But I'd say that brand standing in the market. But speaker recruitment, we've spoken to a lot of high level people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's always something that's quite outstanding in our role, and how we gain access to these people, working with gatekeepers, sweet talking secretaries.
I would say
assistants.
become besties with a PA.
Oh,
that's my tip. It really is. I probably put extra smiley faces on those emails and I'm extra polite. Maybe even sometimes I'm like, I do have the deadline of getting this delivered in 2 weeks. If you don't mind really giving me a yes or a no, highly appreciate it. Speaker acquisition can be the part where I can either love it the most or hate it the most. Certainly at some point you do get a lot of emails and everyone's already quickly saying yes and everything seems to be going perfectly, and then all of a sudden you do hit a bit of that wall where it's you have very specific slots left, and you really need to dig in for who is that person that's going to make that panel great? What's the angle that we're missing?
Yeah.
And delving a bit more into that does mean that things go a bit slower sometimes. Because you do really want at the end of the day that panel fits. And then, to be fair, we've not really touched on this, but a lot of times you really need to be looking at the diversity of your event. Depending what sector you're in, that is an easier task than others.
Yeah.
And it's quite complicated because a lot of times I have these conversations with people where they're like, I won't speak on a panel, or I don't know, I'm looking at the whole diversity of your event and I'm not quite satisfied. And it's a tricky conversation to have. Sometimes as well, as a woman, you're like, trust me, a panel is not what I want to be delivering. But I do always say events reflect the sectors and the state of that sectors with their diversity. So I do a lot of times try to say, like, I'm trying to get more diversity, but if you're not seeing that at the events, please do look internally at what your company is doing to promote diversity, because a lot of times you have a speaker drop out who happens to be a woman or anyone, and all they do is send male replacements, and you're just like, isn't there anyone else in the company? But yeah,
I think on that aspect of representation in speaker lineups as well is a really tricky subject. Like you said, first of all, it's sector dependent. There are some sectors that are more male dominated, and also who is speaking on the circuit and who by their company is being sent out. And like you said, that's down to the companies to have a more representative group of speakers to represent their company. But I think also the other side, and I think this is where our job is really hard, is I never want to sacrifice content for representation and tokenism, because that is what it is at a point. I have really had to juggle with the fact of when I'm recruiting people, and I don't want to recruit a woman just because she's a woman to speak on a session. I want her to speak as a subject matter expert. I want her characteristics, or whether it's down to ethnic minority, social background, whether they, openly have a disability or something. And I never want to pick a speaker based on those facts. I want to speak to them based on their expertise. I will always make sure that my lineups are representative, and that is a really key thing, because we need to. Like, we can't just, like you say, have an 80-90% male lineup. We need to have better representation. And I did live an event earlier this year where we really increased the diversity, and we had so many female-led sessions or all-female panels. But I don't want to bring somebody onto a session purely for representation purposes.
No, and I think women notice it as well. I've had it before where they've been like, am I just the one? I'm like, no, actually, I really have digged into your background. But there is that hesitancy sometimes from female speakers when they especially see that there's quite a male heavy panel.
As well, I've seen it in sectors. It's very common in financial services, where it's very male dominated, especially on the speaker circuit, and there is only a number of speakers that female speakers that are comfortable to jump on stage and talk about their expertise. And I remember I emailed one saying, could you please join this panel? I'd worked with her before, and she said to me, I'm doing so many events at the moment. And she was being grabbed for everything, because I think she was one of a dozen female speakers in this sector, and to speak on these kind of subjects as well. And a lot of the time as well, especially if you're doing like a really big show. And I had this instance once actually where there was a panel and it was all male, and they said to me, we're really concerned actually. And I really appreciated this from all of the men on the panel. They were really concerned that we're an all-male panel. And I said, I did reach out to a number of female speakers to join as well, make sure that we have a representative lineup, not just on gender, but on race, across the board. And they wanted to speak on other subjects. They're still at the event.
Yeah.
And I was happy with the lineup of the people that I had on this panel. It just happened to be 3 men. But does that discount their expertise and their credibility as speakers? No, it doesn't. Yeah. And I think, and not only that, across the rest of the event, I would say it was, just picking it up, probably 60 to 70% female speakers. Majority of the panels were, I'm going to reset. The majority of the panels were female-led, all female speakers as well. And I thought this one instance of one all-male panel is not going to be a problem. So, yeah.
Yeah,
it's controversial, I know. But I think that, you know, as long as we can make sure that there's representation across the board,
the event, yeah.
we can't take away from their expertise just because, you know, we didn't get a female speaker for that particular session. This is a whole other episode in itself.
Yeah, to be fair.
This is a whole other episode entirely. But yeah, I think, yeah.
And then I guess the last one, we now have all speakers confirmed.
No, there's two more. There's two more stages. Prep.
That's what, prep and the actual delivery.
Prep,
yeah.
and then on site. So speaker prep. And that's a really massive part. But I would say, in short, we look at prep calls.
I think it's the most tiring one for me to an extent because
it has to happen so close to the event.
Yeah.
And it's constant, and you're fielding all the questions from the other departments about what's happening on site. But then I think one of the last big ones that I did, I counted it, and I had 45 hours of speaker prep calls over 2 to 3 week period.
Yeah.
And that's being on call, briefing them about the event, going over whether it's their solo session or a panel discussion, going into the content, needing to be ready to talk about these subject matters every single time. And then after that, writing up the brief and sending it across and making sure that everyone's happy.
I would say you've actually missed one step, which is the one that annoys me the most.
Which one's that?
It's getting people like diaries to match.
Oh, no, I did. I think I just blank out that phase every time because I just pretend it doesn't exist.
That one, if you are actually a speaker and you're listening, that is honestly really annoying when they do not read the emails properly. And there'll be like 3 suggestions that seem to be most of the people in that email chain can make. And then someone comes in with a wild card of the following week. And then again, the conversation goes and you're just like, please just slightly move your schedule a little bit for me.
I think it's hard when we've got some of the senior leaders that we work with, and finding time in their diary is always really sparse, which is why we have to try and get it in as early as possible.
Yeah.
But it's when you quantify just how many hours, like let's say, because we do a lot of bigger shows, you've got, let's say per stage you've got 10 sessions, and let's say you've got 6 to 7 stages, but you've also maybe got a couple of other smaller theatres. And some community tracks, and maybe there's a podcast show as well, and you've got to brief all of these people. And I've done shows whether it's 30 speakers, 100 speakers, 450 speakers, and it's intense. And there's different ways. Obviously 450 speakers, you are not going to jump on an individual call with all of them. I will do a webinar and they can all jump on. What was it?
Yeah, I mean, actually I recently got hired literally just to do the briefs.
Really?
For a client, they were like, could you just write the briefs? I think it was for about 4 forums that I did, and just get like the basics of the briefs done. And then individually, when they were doing the calls, they were filling them in. But that goes to show it is literally so much work depending on the size of the event. So yeah, I would say that's the moment where I probably lose most sleep, hate life a little bit more, require more coffee.
We love our jobs.
I love my job.
It is an intense process though, because you're also so close, and this is also the point where things can fall out, and you have speakers that cancel. You realise that a content session is not as strong as you originally planned. Maybe somebody hasn't done enough prep, and that's when it really comes down to the wire.
And you get bombarded with so many emails that have so many silly questions, if I'm being very honest. One of the largest events I've ever run, I actually ended up putting an out of office that was essentially a frequently asked questions to my speakers.
When's the event? How do I get there?
Honestly, it was lots of like, if you're asking about PowerPoint submission slides, like this is the link. If you're wondering how long you have to be before at the venue, it's 30 minutes. And I basically at the start of it said, if your answer is within this, I am not answering your email, so read through. It was probably one of the sassiest things I've done. But I actually had a lot of speakers reply and saying that was actually really useful. So worked out in the end.
I think we have so many stakeholders grabbing us at that point, and speakers being one of our biggest stakeholders in terms of that success of that event. So we have a lot of people to talk to. And I mean, I do an FAQ on my out of office. I think that sounds like a great idea. But final stage.
Final stage.
I think there's more after this one, but I think once we've done this bit, I just kind of forget that everything happens. And that's the on-site delivery.
Yeah.
And the most intense days where we've spent however many hours sat at the desk over our laptops, and then suddenly we're required to do probably around about 30,000 steps a day running around show floors.
Yeah, I think my record's actually been 45,000 steps a day.
Amazing.
Yeah, weirdly, actually, recently I was at an event, I was speaking to the other producer. We were saying how you spend sometimes months or even close to a year working on this. Every day of your workday, you're literally working towards it. And then the event comes and it's 2 days and you are wishing those 2 days away. You are so like, I just want this to be done because you're so tired and you're so thinking like, let's just get it done. Let's just move it. Let's just roll it. I'm tired. But then you eventually get the event buzz and you're happy. But and to be fair, if you've prepped everything perfectly beforehand, the events kind of run by themselves and it's a bit...
Speakers go where they need to go. A lot of the time when they're ready and they're prepared and they want to get their session done, they want to deliver it. And we're there to just guide, almost like they're waves, aren't they? It's literally waves. If every session is starting at the same time, you've got multiple tracks, they just go as waves and you just make sure they're all going in the right direction. But there's a few kinks every now and again.
You're just putting off fire sometimes.
Yeah. We love our jobs.
I love it.
I think this is the one thing that always makes me laugh, though, and I talk to any other producer, and we always talk about how the stress, the putting out the fires, the insane questions, how much sometimes what we feel like we do is babysitting. And to any speakers that also see this, I don't want you to think we're talking badly. Like, we love what we do. I think we do. We really do. It's great. Like, I think one of the things of being a producer, we learn a lot. Yeah. We become mini subject matter experts. Great at pub quiz.
Oh, true.
I know so much about Ofsted regulation and parental engagement policy from when I did education events. I do not have children. I have not been in school since I left school, and I don't know why I know these things. But if it ever came up a pub quiz, I'm your gal. But yeah,
I mean, I thrive on site, to be honest. I've had people I've worked with say I become a bit of a different beast, but you do actually almost have like an alter ego. There's the on-site ego because you're almost like you have to be very friendly and polite to these speakers, and you actually do want to speak to them. But you'll have marketing come and be like, oh, so and so has dropped out, and then or this is not working, and you're very much like having to give quick solutions on the spot. Yeah. Whilst then at the same time as guiding all these teams and giving a solution, then turn around and be the nicest and polite person to like a minister and be all like, hi, welcome.
You got to put on your customer service voice in your face and you go, hi, lovely to meet you. And then you literally turn around and you're speaking, to something on internal, and you're like, right, done. Like you need to get like, what was it? A, B, C, D needs to be sorted with. And then you turn back around and there's another speaker and it's like, oh, so lovely to see you.
It's exhausting.
All I'm thinking is we're now talking about this, and I know that we both, because a big part of our speaker recruitment is using LinkedIn, so all of our speakers that we work with are going to see us spilling our secrets. So, but I think that's a pretty good idea of what conference, but there is so much more to conference production.
There is the post-event stuff, but
and it's
the one that we all forget about.
Which I think we might as well just forget now, and maybe we'll cover it at some point, but I think it's a real beast of a job.
Yeah.
I think it can often be underestimated of how much goes into it, and that's what we want to talk about, actually. Yeah. That's why we want to do this. We want to uncover a little bit more about what we do as our role, the importance of it as well, how it shapes events, but also why investment is needed. Because that's a big conversation for me, is especially as a freelancer now and starting my business. I loved working in-house. I did. We had great teams, but I just wanted to do other events. I wanted to work in other sectors. And working now as a freelancer and seeing constantly across the board in different companies where budgets get cut, or there's a lack of investment in technology, or just figure it out as it goes along. But actually, if you took a little bit more thought into it and put a little bit more money into it, you can get some absolutely exceptional things. The one thing I will say with conference production as well, we have the lowest investment across all of the departments. We don't get the tech. We don't get the budget. Oh my God, speaker budgets. I mean, she gets more than me when we work together. What was it? You've worked with some amazing speakers. And I've worked with great speakers as well, and I've had paid speakers. Yeah. But the disparity in budget that we get to pay towards bureaus that we work with is incredible. And there's a little bit of spill the tea there. So, yeah. But so that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, and hopefully now our parents will actually understand what we do.
If they'll listen to this. So thank you for joining episode 1 of Speakeasy. I hope we've explained what we do, but next time we're going to go a little bit more in depth. And
yeah, see you at the next episode.
Thanks, guys.